Hello, welcome. Hi, Gianluca, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you.
I'm very well, thank you. So we have just started streaming, and let's try and set a little bit of background then on why we're meeting today and what we want to accomplish. So we met up last week because you had a small problem that you wanted to try and get over with Terraform. Uh, and I thought I could maybe help, but we ran into a couple of challenges with that. Do you want to just set a little bit of background on what you were trying to accomplish?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I have and I contribute to a lot of different projects and organization, and usually it's not that open when it comes to managing the organization itself. So creating a new repositories or assigning new labels to repositories or adding new members and owners and teams. It's something that you always have somebody to ping and ask because it's that's how it works. But I realized that there is a different way. There is a Terraform GitHub provider that a few organizations use, where you can, programmatically create a pull request and somebody can review it and merge, and the automation Terraform itself will apply the change on the GitHub organization. And I think it is a good idea to be open in that as well. And yeah, that's why I asked you to help me, because I didn't know Terraform that well, and it was a good chance to learn something new.
Yeah, exactly. And we did manage to get somewhat of the way right. So using the Terraform provider, we were able to automate the creation of our labels on a single repository. We managed to use some of the new features of HCL from Terraform 0.12 that allowed us not to have to duplicate that resource definition for each label that we wanted as well. So that was really cool. But unfortunately, the challenge came when you threw that dreaded question at me of how can we create these labels on more than one repository? And I was like, that's a challenge.
Because you can nest that you cannot nest for each, like as you do with code. So we were able to do a for each on the labels, but we weren't able to do the for each on labels and all the repositories. So that was that's where we stopped.
Exactly. Cool. But that's great background there. I think we covered everything. So what I thought it would be cool for us to do today is I'm also a big fan of another infrastructure tool that shares a lot of the same responsibilities that Terraform does, called Pulumi. I know that you're a huge advocate based on your talks of infrastructure as code. And when you say that, you mean actual code. Like you like to get your hands inside Go, right? That's your tool of choice. So what I thought we would do is use Pulumi. I'll try and explain the concepts as we go for anyone that's not familiar with it and why we're doing what we're doing. It should feel very similar to Terraform. The major difference is that you use a real programming language to do everything that we want to do, which means we have the ability to throw in loops for whatever reason we want to duplicate the creation of certain resources. I'm going to do this in TypeScript because I'm most familiar with that when working with Pulumi. But assuming we get through this relatively quickly, what I would like to do is then just replicate one certain aspect of it in Go so that you can see the comparison of the code side by side, and just to show you that it works anyway.
But I mean, I'm a fan of TypeScript because it's strictly typed, so I'm good with that.
Excellent, good. All right, so let's get started then. I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to pop over here, and we should see that I have, at this point in time, a almost empty repository. So there is nothing inside of our TypeScript directory. So let's start there. I'm going to do this from the very scratch. So nothing exists yet. So we can see the entire flow as we go from 0 to everything with Pulumi. So Pulumi provides a wizard that allows us to use a starting template to do a lot of the boilerplate that is required to generate whatever kind of infrastructure that we want to provision. So when I type Pulumi new, maybe I can make this bigger. Oh, yeah, that'll do. Okay. When I type Pulumi new, we get access to all the templates that are available. So I don't want to do anything with AWS or Azure or GCP. You know, we're doing something slightly more unique today. So I'm just going to hit show additional templates. And that just gives you a list of all of the templates and not just the more popular ones. And what we can actually see is that we do have access to, okay, there we go, there's my arrow. We also have access to packet templates, which we'll play with another day. And so I'm just going to start with a really basic TypeScript template where it has no providers configured, and then we'll add on the GitHub provider ourselves. So we'll give this a name. We'll just call this GitHub demo. Description isn't important. The stack isn't important. This is the first thing which is different from Terraform. So let me kind of cover this. Let's just get it finished. My testing from earlier. Okay, so we'll start actually from the scratch. I had some state saved into my home directory with stats that I was testing the setup of this working on with. So I just blew that all away. I'm going to do a Pulumi login. Now, the Pulumi login is kind of like a backend provider for Terraform. It's where do you want to keep your state file? And I'm just going to use local. That's all that means. Then I will run new again. But I don't have to run new again. As you can see here, we actually have the boilerplate there. It just failed to create our stack. So I'm going to delete the stack file, which is this pulumi.dev, and we'll create the stack manually. So we call it dev, and we've got to provide a password. Now, this is the second major difference. The first major difference from Terraform is we're using a local provider, which I guess you can do with Terraform. And the second major difference is we're providing a passphrase or a secret to do secret encryption locally. So we don't have to worry about providing environment variables to pass in all of our secret tokens. I'll show you what that looks like as we create our first one, because we are going to have to configure the GitHub access token as well. Okay. But let's see what we have just now. This is a TypeScript configuration, which just sets up some stuff for the TypeScript compiler. None of this is Pulumi-centric. If you've worked with TypeScript before, this file is just something that you write once and hopefully forget about forever. Yep. So we're not going to cover that anymore. We have a Pulumi.yaml, which just has some metadata about our Pulumi stack. So we just have the name and the runtime that we're using. There are other runtimes, which is something that I really like about Pulumi. And hopefully we do get to do the Go stuff at the end. But although we can do Go and TypeScript, Pulumi also offers us the ability to use the .NET languages, which includes C#, F#, Visual Basic. I'm sure there are other .NET languages which I'm forgetting. You also have the ability to use Python and something else. So you get a good spectrum of languages, so you can hopefully find one that you're comfortable writing. Then we have our stack, and you can see that because we're using the local login, which means I'm storing my state files on my local machine, it just does a little bit of configuration around secrets and encryption so that anytime we do add a secret to this file, it will be encrypted, and we will have to provide the decryption password whenever we run a Pulumi command. This just means we can actually really use Pulumi as a GitOps tool because everything that we need does actually live inside of the repository, which makes the CI and CD integration stage a lot simpler.
Okay. So that's secure by default, let's say. You can push that file and that's it.
Well, yeah, I mean, my password is password123, so I'm not going to push that because I say anyone could brute force that in a matter of seconds. Yeah. But if you were to provision or use a really secure passphrase or something you had stored in one password, yes, this repository would be safe to store in a relatively public fashion. That's not a challenge for any would-be hackers that are watching. So next up, we have our package.json. Because we are using Node.js and TypeScript, we just use the same ecosystem for distributing the SDKs that we need to consume. So what I'm actually going to do first is just add our GitHub SDK so that we can begin to provision GitHub resources. So if I type Pulumi, GitHub, I should get complete, yep. And we can see that we're going to use the GitHub provider version 142. And we will just while we walk through the actual TypeScript code, run a yarn install. Assume I was in the right directory here. Good. Okay. Next up, we have our TypeScript code itself. So currently the yarn install is running, which is why we have the red squiggly. But we're not actually doing anything else yet. So let's import our GitHub provider. And now we're in a position where we can create resources in order to tell Pulumi to go and do something for us. Now that sounds a bit meta, so let's just do this by example. So anything that we assign to a variable in Pulumi will be created as a resource. So if I want to create a repository, let's call this a demo repository. We do new github.repository. And we're going to give this a resource name, which is very similar to what Terraform has as well. So we'll call this demo repository. And I think, I haven't used this GitHub provider before, but all of the Pulumi resources follow the very same pattern. And Terraform does this too, is that you have a resource identifier and then you have an object which takes parameters. So inside of this object syntax here, where I have these curly braces, we could just use the autocomplete because this is TypeScript. We have all of this information.
That's nice. That's what I love. Having actual
exactly. Yeah, you want to be able to leverage all that tooling we have in our IDEs to make this as painless as possible. I mean, like I said, I've not used this provider before, and I don't need to know because my editor is going to tell me what I need to do. So
that's great. Yeah.
Let's give this a name. We'll call this demo repository. Let's give it is there a description? Yep. So my demo repository, use my ID to clean that code up. Let's just have a look and see. I don't want to go through every variable. I just want to make sure there's nothing that is.
Yeah, they also look similar to the Terraform provider as well, because I see the auto init, the has issues and all the stuff. So it looks familiar in the term.
So it's really, really funny that you mentioned that. So this is the Terraform provider. What Pulumi do is they actually build a wrapper around it to analyze, I don't know if it's an actual AST, but they analyze the guts of the Terraform provider and then provide a Pulumi SDK on the other side of it.
That's nice.
Yeah. So it's good. I mean, as people are maintaining, you can take advantage of the fact that Terraform has been around for so many years and has loads of providers, and people are always supporting it and using that tool. So by adopting Pulumi, you inherit all of that as well, which is really nice.
Yeah, that's cool.
So I'm just going to we'll turn on has issues, and that's it. That's all I need to do to create a repository. Now, because you do have some Terraform experience, we'll just kind of cover one more thing, and then we will test this. The thing that we want to test is exports. So we'll say demo repository equals demo repository URN. Yeah, there we go. So what exports why have I got a red squiggly? Oh no, hold on. Export const demo repository. We'll get there. All right, okay, cool. Squiggles be gone. Whenever we export something from our TypeScript code, we are telling Pulumi that that is an output, very similar to Terraform outputs. It basically means I may wish to get this piece of information from the state file relatively quickly. Or often. So it's a little convenience around that so you don't have to go through too much. I'm just going to pull out the URN, which is the unique resource name. Yeah, I think that's close enough, which means that we can interact with that outside of the stack if we wanted.
I see.
Okay. Assuming I haven't done anything wrong, we should be able to run a Pulumi up. Now, we haven't configured the GitHub authentication yet. I'm hoping it will complain and yell at me and tell me what I need to do for that to work. So we'll enter our password. Let's see, yes. Okay, so this resource requires a GitHub organization to be set on the provider. All right, so let's see. So there's the concept of providers here. I am hoping if we do GitHub provider equals new GitHub provider, what do we need? Oh, that's not a thing. That's just auto-completing from my... There we go. Okay, so we're going to give this a name. So we'll call this Rawkode just because I'm using my own account. And we need a token, which we'll cover in a second. And organization is optional. So we're just going to skip over that. Okay, so now I have to inject my token into this. I have not cheated, but kept it hidden in a file. If I do GitHub token pb copy, and then go back into the directory, what I want to do is now use the Pulumi secret mechanism and config mechanism to set this value. So if I do config set secret GitHub token, but hopefully, I don't think it shows you this when I paste it. That would have been awkward.
Then you made a good job.
Okay, now what I can, oh no, maybe I can't show you because I told everyone my password is there. What we have here is just the secure encrypted version of that string, which I'll take away very quickly. So I could commit this to Git if I was using a secure password. Okay, and now we want to pull in this token. Pulumi makes this very simple too. So we do config equals new Pulumi config. Great. Pulumi. Oh, my autocomplete is broken. And config equals new Pulumi. Oh, wait, why is that a red squiggle? My provider is there. Let's try deleting and pulling it back in. That was weird. I'm sure that's the same piece of code.
Oh, but it's a typo, I think. Oh, no.
So we could do config, and then down here, what we say is we require secret. And I called my secret GitHub. I think I called it GitHub token. Let's just GitHub underscore token. Perfect. Okay. So we're pulling in the configuration, which is a stack-based configuration from our dev stack. We want to require the secret. If that wasn't set, it would complain. And hopefully, we now have enough for this to work. Okay, so I do need an organization.
So it's not that optional.
It's not that optional. Okay, can I be my own? Assuming I can just create a repository on my... Oh, what's happened there? I don't suppose you changed anything in a dev file? Okay, let's just try unset Pulumi. right, I'll set it myself. Equals password. Weird.
Right, I think it just got confused. It's emotional. We're live, so you know how it works.
All right, we're getting the same error again. So this demo is not going very well. This resource requires a GitHub organization to be set on a provider. Now, I believe I set. Oh no, haha. Okay. I do this all the time with the Kubernetes provider as well. So the problem is I created a provider and didn't actually use that.
Oh, you're not using it.
Exactly. So I wonder if I could probably remove that organization and it would work. We'll leave it on just now and we'll see what happens. But we have to tell it to use our provider. Yep, and then the org failed.
Yeah.
So I could have predicted all of this. Right, okay, come on. We got this. Rats. All right. So how do we... So is there something I can provide? So because this uses the Terraform provider, what we can actually do is just go check the Terraform documentation and see what requirements the repository has. And so it needs an owner. Okay, so let's set the owner. Owner. Weird formatting thing. I cannot set an owner. Let's have a look at what this is trying to do. So what about here? Individual, there we go. And that's required Boolean. So we're going to say true and not set the organization.
I think that's should be enough.
Logically,
it looks enough. Let's see.
A smart person would have tested this previously. All right. So
that's why we do streaming.
So
do it together.
Yeah, we'll get there. I don't mind looking silly. So provider config warning, individual deprecated for versions later than 3.0.0. Absence of an organization already enables this.
It looks like forever race condition.
It does. It's not going to be the best demo, is it? I'm not even getting past the first hurdle. All right.
But I mean, it's a warning, so it shouldn't fail for that. I presume it fails from some other reason. Oh, because the GitHub organization is required. Yeah.
Yeah, so it still says the GitHub organization to be set on the provider. You know what? I am very tempted to just create a very quick organization to get us past that problem, and then I will work out how to make it work.
Yeah, I think you should do it.
And then we will file bug reports because we are good open source citizens. All right.
That's what we'll do at the end of the stream.
All right, so we'll call this Pulumi demo org. Let's put in my own email. Personal. Go. Skip. All right, my organization is called Pulumi Demo. That organization will now live forever because I will forget to delete it for the rest of my days. So I'm assuming we can maybe pass in a string here. Yep, organization name to manage. Okay. If individual is false, organization is required. Yeah, that's annoying. Okay, let's see what happens. Okay.
That's better.
Do we have a repository? We do. Nice. Okay.
Very nice.
I mean, a bit more complicated than I was hoping for a live stream, but we got there in the end. Okay. Let's, because this is, okay, what is really cool, like, I think we've got a good idea of what Pulumi is doing. So rather than jumping straight into the labels, let's show off one of the benefits of this being in pure code, right? Because we can make this a function. This is my favorite thing to do in Pulumi, is to take logic like this, create functions which take parameters and return templated objects like so. So instead of passing in a hard-coded name, we're going to parameterize this. I'm not going to bother with these for now. We could template that, of course, later. And then this here becomes create repo demo repository. And I can do that again. And we've got our output there. Remind me to cover outputs before we wrap up. But what should happen now is if I run Pulumi up, we've managed to extract core logic. Oh, we've managed to break everything. Yeah, I didn't give my that. I need to give it a type. There we go. Yeah, TypeScript keeping me correct. So good.
Good job, TypeScript.
Yes, thank you, TypeScript. Hopefully what we see here is we're going to update one repository where we remove the description and the issues thing, and we create another one. So if we pop over here, we have our two repositories using the same block of code that we extracted that logic and stored it as a function, which I think is really, really cool.
Yeah, and I think it's worth to repeat the same concept we made for the last video, that I think it's important to create those kind of utility functions because they help consistency in terms of how a repository looks like, or when we will get to team creation and owners and maintainers, you will have the same structure no matter who is opening up a request. So I think that's very important as well.
Oh yeah, totally. So let's solve your problem from the last scenario, and then we'll wrap this up. So let's say that we want our create labels, and we're just going to go straight into this being a function where we have a name and a color. This is a function, and it's going to return a new GitHub. Oh, typing. There we go. And we want an issue label where the name is name. So because this is going to be a templated resource and we're going to apply these labels to multiple repositories, this would resolve in a name conflict on the second repository. So we'll come back to that in just a moment. But we'll give it a name, and then we'll do color, and we'll do name is name. And this is going to need a repository. Okay, so that means we have a new parameter. So we're going to create a label on a repo, and then we can use that to template this for guaranteed uniqueness. So what we're actually going to say is repo.name, repo.
Oh, because that's the identifier.
Exactly. So each repository would then be a unique resource based on the repository and the label name, which will work.
Yeah, I see. Because we see in the UI, we see labels with the same name across repositories, but technically they are different labels with different IDs. So that's why we need a different identifiers. I see.
Exactly.
It has a lot of sense.
So now we have a function called create label that takes a repository name and a color, and we'll do exactly as we need. So let's assume that we have const labels equals an array of labels. We'll just do 2. Let's not spend too much time on this. Color 00FFC0. All right. So now we want to create these labels on each of our repositories. I could create another helper function that loops over this, but let's just for the sake
that's on us.
For the sake of quickness, we'll just do label, and this is going to do create label, and we pass in our demo repository, we pass in our label.name, and we pass in our label.color. And then we can copy that entire loop. We do this for demo repository 2. That's it.
That easy.
Okay, so we do have a duplicate resource because, what did I mess up? Repo name. What have I got? Okay, let's read this properly instead of skimming. So, duplicate resource URM, Pulumi GitHub demo, issue label, call toString on an output. Aha, right, got it. So there's there's this really weird thing that happens in Pulumi, and that when you want to use an output, which in our case, this repository is a promise. So this value that create repo returns is a promise to a data structure that represents a repo that doesn't actually exist yet. So when we pass this in, what we actually need to do is build in the ability to wait for that promise to resolve. And we can do that with coming down to here. What we can see is demo repository dot apply.
Yeah, that's where my JavaScript skills starts to fade apart.
Yeah, that would be that's a Pulumi output, right? The GitHub repository. Why is it not giving me the autocomplete I would expect? Repository. Yeah, because we want the name.apply. Okay. And that's going to give me a name which can be used inside of a function. And then, so that's just, I know this is difficult for anyone coming across this. It's just not familiar with how this works. But because this doesn't exist yet, what we're saying is when this name is available, we want to then apply a function, and then those functions will create the labels for us. And we can
back in the day, I worked in the UI land with Angular, so I remember like promise like concept, but I'm not fluent with it anymore. So, yeah, I get what we are doing. It's fine.
All right, cool.
I presume for people that knows JavaScript better than me, this is like what they do all day, almost like I do with if error equals like nil. And I error handling in Go, so everyone is something.
Yeah, for sure. In fact, I mean, if anyone is watching that's going, I still don't get it. There is a great documentation on the Pulumi programming model. So you can just search Pulumi programming model. If you click on inputs and outputs, it talks about what is actually happening under the hood there. Okay. So if we run this again, we should now be in a position where no. Come on, Pulumi, be nice to me. So what have I got wrong here? Because I'm not passing. Oh, silly me. I'm passing in then the output instead of the name. All right. Okay. So that just means I have to change this function to no longer take the repository.
I think you have to set the type of the name argument in the apply function.
Maybe correct. Yes. So let's just quickly get this function signature right. So now we're no longer passing an output. Although that's another point. Another way I could have done that. We'll talk about that in a second. So because that's an anonymous function, I don't think it's going to kind of care too much about the type, and it inferred it from here. Okay. If I did want English failure, if I did really want to pass in the GitHub repository here, instead of handling the promise further than the stack there. I could have used pulumi.interpolate here, where I request the value, and that's a magic function that would have resolved that promise for me in line. So I could have done that, which actually probably would have been a bit nicer. But now that I've kind of committed and done all the other code, we'll stick with that. So we're going to run Pulumi up. I want to see a nice. Yep, good. We're now going to create those. We're going to create those
green.
labels. That's red.
No, that's red.
The provider. So let's quickly fix that. Provider is the GitHub provider. And I'm going to copy this code. So you can set the default provider programmatically. I don't remember how to do that off the top of my head. I'm not going to try and guess it. So we will just set it inside of that function. We run yes. It's going to give me all my labels. No. No. Okay. Validation failed. No, I'm not sure if I can fix that. That looks like an actual API error.
Yeah.
Why is GitHub
color code? I think it's the color that is not well defined.
Do you think it wants that off?
I don't know.
Let's take off the hash, and if that fails, I'll try red. Oh, I think Gianluca got it. Well done, Gianluca.
Yoo-hoo, that's why I'm here.
All right, so let's pull up our demo repository and
show
issues.
Label.
Let's enable.
Now you can look at the issues from the pull request. You can look at the issues from there.
Right, okay.
Just click in there, and there is a label. Yeah.
Ta-da!
Oh yeah, nice color. That worked.
Yep, you can tell I'm not a designer. All right. Okay, final thing. So we created function, and we can duplicate whatever labels we want across all of our different resources. And we have our stack output, which is just like our Terraform output. Obviously, with the GitHub example, there's not a lot of useful information that we want to make available to other scripts, etc. But the outputs the exporting does allow us to have access to these outputs. And we can get that through JSON as well. I think the parameter is JSON. Perfect.
Oh, I see. So we can pipe. Technically, we can pipe like stuff.
Oh yeah. So I could do the demo. And if this was creating a GCS bucket or an S3 bucket or anything like that, then I could then, grab that resource and use that in another script by using JQ and a bit of JSON wrangling. So
yeah, that's cool.
And these outputs can be consumed by other Pulumi modules in the same way that Terraform modules can do that as well. So if you write like a core infrastructure repository that spins up a Kubernetes cluster on JKE and exposes a kubeconfig, you could then use that kubeconfig in other repositories by consuming that shared output state as well. All right. So that's Pulumi. Any thoughts? Let me jump back over to our...
I think it's one of the reasons about why I never tried it is because I really never looked at the code for it, and I thought it was like a lot of code that had to be right. I didn't know that it was reusing like Terraform providers, or I presume it reused the AC2, the Amazon SDK when it comes to interact with a cloud provider. So I think it's in this sense, I think the stability is like guaranteed by the fact that it uses like underlying components that are solid and used by like everybody in the world. So that's cool. And yeah, I mean, I'm a fan of like using code. So I think that brings me the joy of my IDE or my like Vim setup with infrastructure as code that usually is a pain full of YAML and JSON. I mean, I also like. Does it work as has Terraform? So there is no concept of reconciliation like CloudFormation or other like tools we may have, or.
Yes, there is. So it uses the Terraform modules to understand the resources, the inputs and the outputs, but it handles all of its own reconciliation, state management, etc. So it will do its best job scenario. In fact, when you run like a Pulumi preview, that's actually only giving you its best guess of what it thinks it has to do, and then it looks up the current state at apply time and then tries to work out what it has to do. So there's a whole bunch of other stuff going on that I'm probably not knowledgeable enough to actually talk about. But it works really well for Kubernetes as well. It does not use the Terraform Kubernetes provider. They wrote their own provider for Kubernetes that understands CRDs and can actually do in-flight programming logic. Like if you can imagine you want to update a deployment on Kubernetes, you can have Pulumi do it, monitor the stats from InfluxDB or Prometheus, and then roll back that deployment if it isn't going the way you're working, because we have the ability to use actual code and in-flight computation, which is really, really cool as well. Maybe that's a session we could do another day, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I have another question. I think it's the last one, but how often you saw or people mixing proper code that is not Pulumi related with Pulumi code? Is it common to use I don't know, templates? If I'm speaking in the Go land, but there is the same in TypeScript, I'm sure. But if I have to, maybe I'm creating an EC2 and I have a user a user data to inject, so I can template it and call it. And how far I can go when using traditional libraries that are not Pulumi related?
Let me show you something. So,
yeah, please.
We are obviously short on time. Gianluca and I do have a call, but that question was unplanned, and I feel like I have to show him something now. So, where did I create this? So there, packet examples. Okay, so I've been working on a packet example to spin up servers with user data. Now, I am very opinionated with my infrastructure as code as well. And if I have user data, like this Python script here, or this user data.sh, is I actually want them to live in their own file. I do not want to use template literals within Go or TypeScript, because I lose all of my formatting and my IDE features like autocomplete, right? So because Pulumi is just TypeScript and Node.js, we can actually leverage the entire NPM ecosystem. As you can see here, I'm actually pulling in the mustache templating tool where I load the .sh bash script and then interpolate it with the contents of my Python script to inject into the packet user data. So you can see that we have this Python, we have the bash code, and we actually just inject the Python code into a cat statement to write it to a file on the disk at provisioning time. And I still get all of my niceties. I still get all my Python formatters, my Python auto-completion and stuff like that. So having access to NPM and to GoMod and all of these other things, I think, you can use as many of those tools and libraries as you need to get the job done in a way that works for you, which I think is fantastic.
Yeah, I think that's what I need. So to be happy again with my infrastructure as a code. That I have to say, in the last couple of years, I really tried to avoid as best as possible because I was bored about that. But yeah, I think that this approach really comes to very close to what I was hoping to see. So
awesome.
Thank you for that.
Well, we don't have time to do the Go one. So we'll set a time next week or the week after. We can try and do this in Go for the Tinkerbell repositories, automate all those label creations, and we'll try and write about that as we go. Sound good?
That's great. Yeah, definitely. We're going to use this one and not the one we tried last week, because I'm more comfortable with this.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you very much for your time. I hope the people that are watching enjoyed that, and I'll see you all soon.
Yeah, see you soon. Bye-bye.